I want to welcome Liz Naftali. Her great niece, Abigail, was held captive by Hamas for about 50 days. She was released last November as part of a hostage deal just 2 days after she turned 4. Liz Naftali joins us now from Tel Aviv. Liz, I really appreciate your time today. I want to
Thank
ask.
you.
I want to ask you first about the hostage release today. Al-Qadi, he escaped Gaza, and we heard from his brother who said, "I can't explain these feelings. It's better than being born again." What's the feeling for you today, given you had relatives taken and killed by Hamas? Your beautiful little great niece was released, but how are you feeling today upon that news?
Well, first, the news is amazing because somebody who's been held, kidnapped, and taken across the border 326 days ago is free. He's back, and he's back at home. He's back at home in Israel, where he is a citizen, and it's the most joyous thing because I know after 51 days, while Abigail was a hostage, seeing her actually back in Israel was the moment where myself and our family could just take a breath. You know, seeing her in my niece's arms, her aunt, not her mother, because her mother was murdered. But seeing her back is the greatest relief. But when you ask that question, keep in mind that was 9 months ago. These people, Mr. Al-Qadi and all these other hostages, 110, have been there 326 days. And Abigail, with 105 women and children, were released 9 months ago. And so I just think about the 110 families, the 110 hostages, and they can't breathe yet. They can't have that sigh. They can't say that it's a miracle or they're reborn. They're still in the most incredible pain that I think humans can have.
And Al-Qadi reminded the Israeli Prime Minister in a phone call today from his hospital bed about those other hostages still being held captive in Gaza. You've met with the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, several times. What is your take? Is he doing enough?
Listen, I did meet with the American hostage families, with the Prime Minister on 2 occasions when he was in the United States. And our message was no, he is not doing enough. Because on one hand, he says that he's going to do everything to free the hostages. And he's been saying that for 10 months. And here we are 10 months later, and they are not free. They are still down in Gaza, many of them in tunnels. And so when you say, is he doing enough? No, because my goal and the goal of the 110 families and originally 250 families was to get the release of their loved ones. So until he signs a deal, until he makes a deal, and he can make this deal, it is about political will, he will not have done enough.
And when you look at the numbers, right, the amount of hostages released in a prisoner exchange deal as opposed to this, 7, 8, 9 hostages released after being rescued by the IDF. If you were taking part in the ceasefire talks right now, the hostage negotiations, what would be the ideal outcome? And obviously it can't come soon enough.
Well, first, I think a diplomatic solution is what we saw that worked at the end of November. There was a ceasefire. There was the ability to bring home 105 women and children. So when we talk about what worked, we saw that work. And that was a moment where both the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, and the leader of Hamas, Mr. Sinwar, agreed. And that's how these people, women and children, came home. And that was after incredible work by the U.S. administration, President Biden, Vice President Harris, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Secretary of State Blinken. I mean, everybody has been working on this. You look at CIA Director Bill Burns. I mean, I could keep going on. The Americans have leaned in. The Americans have proven to be Israel's greatest ally, friend, supporter, and they have been instrumental in making sure these talks continue. And then you have the side of the mediators, the Qataris and the Egyptians. So there's all these people. And by the way, think about it. You have the G7 that all wants this deal and all stood for this deal. And then you have the UN Security Council that voted for this deal. And so here we are at this moment, which is like, this is a deal that Prime Minister Netanyahu and Mr. Sinwar are being pushed to do. And we saw that it worked for 105, and now we have 110. And it is the time. We are at that time. We don't have other time. This is that moment. And, it's a moment of bravery and boldness. And, you talked about that 6 hostages had been rescued. In those rescues, remember, so one member of the IDF was killed in that. And if you think about it, in the last week, 6 hostage bodies have been brought back. They were bullet ridden. People are dying. The rate of getting people back with a hostage, with going in and trying to get them via, the army, has not brought back 110 people. It has brought back 6. And now there is Mr. Kinkade, who got out today. And so it's just not a feasible way to get out hostages. And the way to get out hostages is to do the diplomatic route. And I know that this is the number one focus at this moment, because here we are at this point where they're negotiating in Cairo, of President Biden and his team. They're with the teams from the Israeli side, the Egyptians, the Qataris, and I believe representatives of Hamas. This is that moment where we need political courage and we need political will. And that is what will bring home 110 hostages. But to keep going and hoping that the army can go in and get these people. And keep in mind, this was the first hostage that was taken out of a tunnel. The rest were above ground. We believe most of the 110 are under, and they are deep under, and they are guarded. So this idea that we can keep going with the military and that will bring out 110 people, 6, 7 people have been brought out in 10 months.
Yeah. And of course, your niece, your great niece Abigail, taken captive after witnessing the murder of her parents. We're really thinking about her, just 4 years old. Is she doing all right now? How's she doing?
Thank you for asking. And, thank God, thank President Biden, thank America, thank everybody, thank the people that were negotiating and mediating, the Qataris, the Egyptians, because this 4-year-old is now able to be a child who gets to play and go to school and swim and dance and just be a child. But keep in mind, she did not get to come home. Her home was destroyed by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. Her mother and father were murdered by a Hamas terrorist on October 7th. So while there is a point where we are very blessed and she is loved and she will be taken care of with her brother and sister who also witnessed the murder of their parents, this is devastating. And we don't know what will be, but we know that she is loved. But it goes back to this point, which is today we need to get 110 more. They're not 4-year-old little girls, but they are children. There's a one-year-old. They are mothers, they are sons, they are daughters, they are fathers, they are grandparents, they are brothers and sisters. And when I think about Abigail and I look at her and I see this miracle of a child who gets to live and our family at least gets to breathe and move forward, I look and I think this is that moment where we just have to push as hard, and we need everybody to lean in so these other families and these hostages can be free and have the opportunity that Abigail has and these others who have been released through diplomatic negotiations. I'm not a military expert, I'm not a diplomat, but this is that time, and this is a time for the humanity, which we keep talking about, and this is that time that these hostages must be released. And it comes down to Prime Minister Netanyahu and Mr. Sinwar.
Liz, Naftali, we really appreciate your time, and thank you for sharing your story with us. We appreciate it. Thank you. We're going to take a quick break. More of First Move in just a moment.